Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about a little bit of a tech item, which I think is quite exciting now that Archmage has been a little bit more broadened in terms of its power level. This helmet has been around for quite a while and got introduced back in 2.4, which is, I think, around 10 years ago now, and it got buffed at one point from 30% chance to trigger to 50% chance to trigger. Now, the trigger condition is that you spend at least 100 mana with one skill. This is distinctly different to something like gain a power charge after spending a total of 200 mana. This means you actually have to spend that mana with one click. Now, why is this so exciting, and what kind of use cases do you have with this? Now, the first thing you can do is actually build around the helmet. That's exactly what the creator called Cardboard Bastards did. This is quite a neat build. I've been following for quite a while. He's been putting out update videos here and there. I always like watching them. And it is basically a way to automate OP corpse skills. Yes, another one, number 15 at this point, but I think this one actually has quite a bit of merit, and it actually made me want to put it together in standard real quick. The gist of this build is to use Unearth, which has an incredibly fast cast time of 0.3 seconds to summon corpses, and then those get destroyed again. Now, Unearth does not have as good of corpses as Desecrate has, and you can also not manipulate it with Spectres. These will always be Bone Archers. However, you can support Unearth with Empower and Enhance, and the quality here gives increased maximum life of corpses spawn. And yes, just so you know, the corpses spawn quality actually got nerfed from 30 to 20%, but in the grand scheme of things, you're still going to be one-shotting stuff. And one of the things you have to do here, though, is get Unearth to 100 mana. That is kind of crazy, right? Like, we are starting off at 10 mana. It's basically impossible, but what you can do is use Archmage support. This time, you're not really mana stacking, although that could be a thing. I'm not 100% sure it's actually worth it after looking into it a little bit more. Archmage is simply there to increase the mana cost of Unearth. It does, however, overshoot by quite a bit, so you have to get that down again with reduced mana cost in some places. I just literally threw this together randomly. And what you get after that is something like this. Now, if you see my character right here, the cast speed is quite ridiculous. You can barely see him casting. This is basically, if you guys remember, this is what it looks like when you have a lot of soldier stacks. So yeah, that's what you're looking at. There's a lot of proc rate here, and obviously per hit it doesn't do as much damage as something as Desecrate, but holy moly is this one fun to map with. Now, if you want to know how this looks like, I'll quickly show you. I have a little bit of a meme version here with like mana stacking and Arcane Cloak. That was basically just because I didn't want to put in Enhance or anything like that. I'm also using Volley. Original build creator uses GMP, so it basically depends on the use case, but I'll quickly show you how this one plays out. So you go into the map, and yeah, whenever you press Unearth, which is incredibly fast and incredibly fun because there's like basically no cast time, this happens. Now, big problem with this one is you do need specific items, and I'm not just talking about the helmet, which is ridiculously easy to get. Once again, it is a tier 4 unique after all, but I mean, first up for SSF is basically a no-no, and the single target damage until you get stuff like Empower and Enhance, which I do not have in this current state of the build, will be quite rough. So that's something you have to work around with until then. It's not something I would like put on a YouTube channel for a League starter, but it's definitely something you can do as a fun side project. Now, once you have those items, I actually think this build is kind of legit and one of the more efficient and fun ways to automate corpse skills. Another thing to note here is that this item is a tier 4 unique, so it's not something that can just go up because Mr. Streamer makes a video or something, like for example a tier 2 or a tier 1 item can. A tier 4 item realistically will not even ever hit anything close to a divine, even if, I don't know, 20% of the meta plays it. But in general, Kitava's first is just an incredibly interesting helmet. Not necessarily for League start, but definitely for mid-game once you're a little bit more geared. Now, there's obviously downsides to this helmet, like the reduced cast speed. But for example, if you are on a Necromancer and you're triggering Corpse Pack, that is completely negligible. And it will also cost you extra mana, so especially on a build that isn't like a mana stacker or has crazy regen, this can be an issue. Although those kind of builds will also have to cope with the fact that you need to spend 100 upfront mana cost anyways, so you most likely already have a way around that. Now, there are other use cases for this helmet, and that is basically to automate other skills that are kind of a support to something. And that is interesting because bow builds already have this with Asenath's Mark, but a lot of the spellcasters don't. And sure, you have your trigger wands, but First up, you have to craft that first with the Veil Chaos or Wirik. We don't even know what that means. You have to sacrifice a suffix on your weapon, which can be weird, especially when you want to use a unique, like for example, Annihilating Light or something like Power Charge Stackers, right? But with Kitava's first, you have a 0.1 second cooldown, so you will always have it up. It's kind of the difference, for example, of putting Sniper's Mark on your Spell Slinger and it always being up at every rare versus putting it on Mark on Hit, which has like 4-second cooldown. And I want you to notice as well, this has a 0.1 second cooldown, but it also says trigger socketed spells. It does not say trigger a socketed spell, so it can actually be used. Like, for example, Azenav's Mark does say trigger a socketed spell, so it can be used very consistently. One use case I can definitely think of is Lightning Conduit Shock. Now, I don't know 100% if this is going to be consistent enough because it is only a 50% chance to trigger on skill. Other people will have to figure that out. I'm just throwing it into the ether, but Lightning Conduit needs a shock target and you have an automation for that. And sure, there are already other ways, but especially with Lightning Conduit being a lightning skill already and perfectly fitting into that mana stacker archetype that could take a hit, like having to spend 100 mana on upfront cost, this is definitely interesting to know. Then you also have the same thing that you can do with Azenav's Mark, right? You can go something like triple or quad curse or throw your Wave of Conviction in there, right? So for example, if we look at Wave of Conviction, I'm just going to throw in Wave of Conviction and Conductivity, and I cast this, you can see that on every cast, I'm getting it, well, 50% chance, right? As you can see right here, Conductivity is constantly being cast as well as that Wave of Conviction. And while this will often look like a downgrade in PoB, I want to remind you that no, you don't always have your curses up. There is a huge difference between having your 2 or 3 curses on every single rare, right? Especially the juicy ones, or only having it when you put down your Arcanist brand, and then your Arcanist brand also has to apply them, which will also take around about 1 to 2 seconds, which is a ridiculous clear skill. I could put in an arc basically to kind of shore up its weaknesses in terms of clear, so that would help quite a bit, and it is definitely something I'm thinking about. And on the Spirit of Corpse skills, where you need 2 skills, obviously this also goes for other automations that basically want Frostbolt plus Ice Nova Frostbolt or Bladefall Blade Blast, stuff like that. Those are all kind of possible. Now, do they fit into a mana archetype? I'm not 100% sure. You'll have to figure that out for yourself. I just wanted to kind of throw out some ideas. Now, the only small caveat to this that I want to point out here is the Archmage support right here actually got a little bit of a wording change. Now, I personally think this has to be a typo because it would actually be a huge buff to non-Kitava's first builds. But let's just look at this. This is also interesting if you just want to league start mana stackers in general. One thing that changed here, in the patch notes at least, is it doesn't say supported skills have base mana cost equal to unreserved maximum mana. It now says just unreserved mana. Now, for me, this is confusing for 2 reasons, because that could imply that the lower in mana you go, the lower your mana cost gets, which would make it a lot more like the mana stacker archetype, like not even talking about Kitava's first, a lot more friendly towards something like Indigon, as well as that it would just make your mana situation infinitely easier. However, that would be very awkward, right? To kind of have your mana cost scale down the lower you go. That sounds like a lot of server actions and stuff like that. I'm not 100% sure if that is even how it's going to work. The reason why I'm saying this is because it could, and then this helmet is completely bricked, because you always need to spend 100 mana, and if, I don't know, you get hit by something, you have Mind Over Matter, or you just run out of mana and all of a sudden you don't proc it anymore, that might be a disaster. Now, it kind of doesn't make sense, right? As well as that on PoB currently, the wording did not change. So here it still says unreserved maximum mana. I don't know if this is an oversight or if this is actually something that, for example, Local Identity actually knows, and it's just a typo in the patch notes. Either way, I just wanted to inform you about that. But yeah, that's about it. I just wanted to remind you that this helmet exists, and there are some really cool builds out there. I will link to Cardboard Bastard's channel down below in the description. Definitely check him out. And yeah, in general, really stoked about this build. Gonna throw out some more videos, and I'm gonna go back to work in the mine shafts to throw out that League Starter mana stacker. But with that being said, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.